It doesn't matter what site you use. As of the current version of Cascade, I'm not sure what the editor version is, but it's using a thing called tinyMCE. What does MCE stand for? No one knows. Okay. Let me just pull up the page. Well, I should probably create a blank page so I can just do a test. What I want to talk about today is this, what I call either the rich content editor, or I never call it tinyMCE to my users, but I call it the WYSIWYG or the main content page region. I'm going to go over all the buttons today, what all of these little things do, what features you can use to put content on your site. And I probably won't be looking up, so if you have questions, try to write them down so I can answer them later. The first one here in the first row, can everyone see this pretty well? I could do this, but I'll show you that later. Here at the very end is a toggle full screen mode. If you click on that, the editor did the entire screen so you can better see what's going on. I sometimes hesitate to tell my users to use this because the text size on the screen is not the exact same as what the text size is when you actually see your live website. So it's very misleading where line breaks occur here and where they actually occur on your web page. But this is useful if you don't want to see all of the other Cascade-specific modules and items around the screen. So I'll leave this on for right now, but it's the same exact screen, just larger if you don't have it turned on. The first button here is Insert Custom Character. As you can see, as I hover my mouse over all these, they'll give you what they are, what they're used for. This particular feature works wherever your mouse cursor is currently typed. So I always use this as a great example when she was president, but now she's not. France Cordova's name has an accent mark over one of the letters in her name. So usually you might type this because you don't have a keyboard that has an accent mark over your thing. And I always forget which O it was. Was it the first one or the second one? The first one. The first one. So her first O has a cute symbol over the first O. So to insert a custom character, you want to delete the O, put your mouse cursor where you want to insert that, click on the button Insert Custom Character. A new screen pops up with all of these great custom characters you can use to insert. All you have to do is click on one to insert it. I believe the right one is right here. You can see on the right the HTML code, the enum code, if you want to actually type this in your keyboard. But this works well enough for all the characters that you might need to use that are not on a keyboard. So just click on it, and that inserts the character wherever you need it. So now I have the correct spelling of our former president's name. I'll leave that there so I can play around with it later. The next two are Superscript and Subscript. Now, I usually tell my users that there's really no need to use these on an HTML page. You may find for math, for instance, you might be using these for other formulas. The only thing I can think of using these for is if I had a date, such as March 3rd, 2013, and I wanted the RD to be on a half line above. I can select the RD and then use the superscript and have it on a half line above. So now it looks like a nice English book formatted date, I suppose. This isn't really necessary, but you can use it if you want to. Is there any other options that you use superscript and subscript for?
No, not really math.
A lot of these, we as administrators don't have control over what gets shown and what doesn't get shown. So as I go through these buttons, some of them I might tell you, please don't use it all. I can't remove it, but just ignore it because there's really no purpose for it on a website. The next three buttons, bold, italic, and underline, should be pretty straightforward what those do. Now these work after you've highlighted text. They don't really, well, they do work on their own. If I turn them on, they work as a toggle, so now I can type in bold. If I go down another line to a new paragraph, it turns off. So if I type again, oh, never mind, it's still on. But if I highlight this, it works if I highlight text. I'll go over why I'm going over that in a bit when I get to what the difference is between a paragraph and a line break. Italics works the same way, underline works the same way, pretty intuitive. This fourth one, however, strike through, I usually tell people not to use because there's no purpose for doing something like this on a web page where you're now making it harder to read. If you don't want to have something on the web page, I would just remove it. I think that's pretty straightforward. The next four buttons here are alignment buttons. So by default, everything is aligned to the left, although that can change on how the web page you have is formatted. But for the most part, you can align paragraphs left, center, or right. I use the word paragraphs because if I had two lines separated by a line break, so this is actually a line broken line, and say I wanted just the bold to be centered, this is kind of a catch. If I try that, both the line below it and the bold line that I selected get centered. This is a problem because these aren't two separate paragraphs, they're part of the same paragraph. You can think of it that way. And other features such as lists will also get tripped up by this. So if you need to fix this and put this on a line all by itself, I can backspace over it, hit return. Now it's its own paragraph, and now I can treat this as a separate alignment. This trips up my users a lot because if they copy and paste stuff from Microsoft Word, sometimes it gets copy and pasted as paragraphs, as it should. Sometimes it comes in as two line breaks. And I have a page on our website which goes over the difference between two line breaks and a paragraph. But if you just want to see here what it would look like, here's 3 paragraphs, the bottom 3 lines. Here is the exact same thing with 2 line breaks. So now I only have 2 paragraphs. As you can see here, it's not, by just looking at it, it's hard to tell what's a paragraph and what's not. But this, I can't, everything's going to be stuck to it, so I have to treat it as one entity, whereas this is a whole other entity. So keep that in mind when you're working with this. There's really no way to tell except for if I can put my mouse cursor in between, then I can tell it's one big long paragraph. If I can't, like here, it is a paragraph separation. This 4th option here is align full. I don't use this too much, but there's really no reason why you can't use it. I like to use it more for thin columns. If you have a very tight column on your page, kind of like a newspaper column, you can use align full. But for a web page that spans across the entire screen, I don't see a reason to use align full whatsoever. So only for tight columns would I ever think of using align full. I also call it justify, so that option's there for you. This styles dropdown will change depending on what site you're using. So my styles that I have here are not going to be the same as the styles as in your project that you're using. These can be set up by your developer on a separate part of Cascade. So you may have, for instance, other things that aren't featured in these buttons, such as coloring text, applying a different, apply classes for the most part. Any other CSS class you can set up, you can have an option to use here. So I won't go over that for right now, but it does get applied when you highlight and then click on it here. It applies to your highlighted text.
One of the things that can trip people up with that one is if you have colors, so you have lots of different color options. If you choose something and then choose a style color, and then you choose a different color, it actually keeps the colors and just stacks them on top of each other. So eventually you may start seeing some stuff where you choose a color, nothing happens, because all of those styles are kept. In order to clean those out, you actually have to go into code view to clean them out. So if you choose a whole lot of different styles, you may run into some problems with things not responding quite the way you expect them to.
Is there a way that you know to undo a style?
Not without going to code.
Is there a weird format? There is. I don't use colors on mine. Mine are all for tables, so I don't think it'll work here as a test. I can try. This won't really do anything. If you go into here, it'll say class table blank space. So there's these 2 buttons here, which I'm going to get to later. Clean up messy code and remove formatting. Let me click both of those. Yeah, that did get rid of it. No. Yeah, that did get rid of it. So I guess you could do that if you wanted to reset, but there's no way to remove them individually.
Correct.
I suppose.
It's going to take away all.
So you basically start over from scratch every time you want to fix that problem. But like I said, this will change depending on what project you're in and what your developers have set up for you. This next feature here is the paragraph dropdown, or I guess the format dropdown, but what I'm currently selecting is a paragraph. This works on if you have your text highlighted or not. So for instance, let's move France Cordova back over where to the left, and then let me keep this highlighted, select the paragraph dropdown, and turn this into a heading 1. Now I have a heading 1 on my page. I can see that because if I click on somewhere in the middle of it, this now changes to heading 1, and if I click back down here, this changes back to paragraph. So that tells me what line I've selected, what formatting option that is. Same thing for bold, I guess. If I click on a line that's bold, bold is highlighted there, I can see that it was left aligned and so forth. down here, if you're a web developer, this might make more sense to you. So if I clicked on here, I can tell this is a paragraph with a strong tag. And if I clicked on up here, it says this is an H1 tag. So either or, whatever you're used to. If I wanted to change this back to normal text, I can select on it and then choose paragraph, and this changes it back to a normal P tag, as I can see down here. So this is how you undo a format, whereas there's no way to undo a style without removing everything. In the same manner, you could also click on this, change it to a heading, and then use these two buttons that I'll eventually go to later. Clean up messy code and remove format, and I guess it only does it for attributes, it doesn't work for tags. But you can change headings 1 through 6 here. As you can see, they get larger and smaller as you go down the list. These could also have separate formatting styles depending on your CSS. So mine in particular are gold, but they don't necessarily have to be gold colored. There's other options here, address and pre-formatting, which you can use. Address I would only use if you had an address on your page. Pre-formatted for a content contributor, I'm not sure if they would use that too often. What do you think?
Probably not. If you were copying and pasting something and you wanted a section of it to stand out differently, like when you see code on a page and the code example, you want to look a little different. Sometimes people put that in pre-formatted.
So that the font and things like that are different than the copy around it.
But I haven't really seen people use it outside of that.
I guess you might set up a style for that to work. It's a pre-tag around it, right?
Yeah.
Although it's down, oh yeah, it does say pre down there. It probably shows up in the final view of your page, but it doesn't show up in the editor here very well. That's one thing you'll get used to seeing, is that things in your editor window are not exactly perfect from what your final view of your page looks like. It gives you a good enough idea of what it looks like, but I would always check your preview to make sure the text that you see appears as it should. And so that's basically it with the first line. These are basic MS Word type features here, nothing special, I don't think. The second line starts with separate buttons for cut, copy, and paste. These can be used multiple different ways. If I copy this, for instance, I can go down to another line and paste it by clicking on this button, and then it pastes it. You can also, if you're more used to right-clicking, cut, copy, and paste are also in that menu. Anywhere where I right-click, I can paste, and that works just as well. This fourth button here, though, I'm going to get to later. I'm going to skip for right now. It kind of goes more along with the remove formatting and clean up messy code. These are useful for content that you have copied from Microsoft Word or sometimes Outlook or PowerPoint if you're using that to copy content from, possibly a PDF. Any outside source that you have on your clipboard that you're pasting in may have formatting problems. And this is what I use, or this is what you can use for that. So I'm going to leave this for right now, but it helps in that aspect. The next button here is find and replace. This is a very general find and replace text. I guess find is here, but replace is the same thing as long as you don't hit the replace or replace all. It's the same feature. So if I had text, like I wanted to find pre-formatted for some odd reason, I guess that's at the bottom, so I have to choose up.
You're looking for something inside tags, not actual text. Oh, okay, you do that
Yeah, it's there. There it goes. So it found it there. I could replace it if I wanted to with anything else. I don't use this feature too much, but if you have someone's name that might have changed, and you have that person's name on the page a lot, you could then do a find and replace on that page and change that person's name. Or if a date changed and you had that listed a bunch of times, or things like that. It's pretty intuitive what find and replace does. The spell checker. Now this is an interesting button because there is a quirk with it, at least in the current version of tinyMCE that we're using. And that is that it works if you turn it on. It underlines anything that it thinks is misspelled. For some reason, it doesn't ignore the things that have a capital letter in front. So even though Cordova is a proper noun, it thinks it's misspelled, whereas it should ignore it, but that's fine. What do I use here? I use banana as an example. So banana is not misspelled. It doesn't underline it. And now if I misspell it, so banana, hit the button, it finds that banana is misspelled. If I click on the misspelling, it gives me suggestions on what it could be, of which banana is not one possible answer, but that's okay. We'll just pretend that I meant to spell band. However, right now the button is on, the toggle spell checker. If I misspell banana again, it won't underline it. So the Spun Sugar has a quirk whereas it only finds misspelled things when you first turn it on. It won't find anything misspelled after it's already on. So for me to find out that this is misspelled again, I have to turn it off and then turn it back on for it to go through and find all my misspelled words. So that's just something that you get used to as you use the system. I usually tell people to use this at the very end when they're done making content updates so they can then see all of their misspelled words. But don't turn it on at the get-go and then think that it's going to find all of your misspellings as you type. The next two buttons here are for bulleted and ordered lists. Now these work for paragraphs, and that's important because if I have a list, let me go with fruit again. Creates a fruits. I hit enter key after each one of those, that creates a new paragraph. If I highlight these and then click on the bulleted list or unordered list button, that will turn this into an unordered list. If I wanted to change that back to an ordered list now, I could just highlight it again and click on ordered list and that changes it. If I did not have this as a paragraph, like for instance these two, bold and line, broken line, were just technically one big paragraph, and then I try to change this into a bulleted list, it only puts one bullet point there because it only creates a bullet point for each paragraph. Again, that's important because I can click on the middle of this. It's not separated. Where again, it trips you up, so I have to go down, backspace over it, hit return, and now I have two bullet points there. So always keep that in mind because that trips up my users all the time. You won't ever do it yourself, but when you copy and paste content, you'll run into that. With bulleted and unordered lists, or bulleted and ordered lists, I should say, indent and outdent work well for them. So let's say I wanted to create a nested list. I'm going to call this one fruits, if I can spell fruit correctly. And then I wanted to indent this list because this is a subcategory underneath fruits. I can highlight those items, click on indent, and now I have a sublist of my fruit list. I believe I also should be able to turn this into unordered if I wanted to. Yep. And then if I wanted to turn this back, I have to click on this and turn that one item back into a unordered list. So this works as it should. You're probably used to using lists in Microsoft Word. But you can play around with the indentation levels. It works pretty well. If I wanted to get rid of this list, I believe I could click it twice. Yes. So I clicked it once there, which moved everything back one indentation level. If I click it again and click back on each one of these, it moves it back to the paragraphs, which is what it was before I changed this into a list. So now I'm back to normal, and I can do whatever I want to with this text. And outdent and indent work for not only lists, but they also work for normal text as well. So even though this is normal text now, it's not a list, I can still indent this text the same way as if it was a bulleted list. The last two buttons here that are simple buttons that I always say are undo and redo. So if I wanted to undo this and say, whoops, I actually wanted that list there, I can undo a couple steps, get my list back to where it was before I changed everything, and now I have my list back because I undid all of those steps that I once had. So I'll keep the list there so we can play around with it later. And then redo would kind of, in this case, undo my undo and change it back to where it was. I clicked it a bunch of times. That's it for all of the simple buttons that I usually go over. The next one from this point forward are all, I would like to call them web page specific because they have to do mainly with web pages as opposed to simple formatting features. The first one is insert edit link. Now you notice here this is not, I can't click on this. It's grayed out. It's disabled. And the reason for that is just like most of these other buttons, they only work once I've highlighted text on the page. So if I want to insert a link, I have to first type out the link text that this link needs to go to. So let's say pre-formatted, the text itself was a link. I'm going to highlight that text. Once I have something highlighted here, now you can see the insert edit link button is able for me to click on, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And I get a new window where the first thing it asks me is this an internal link or an external link? And this is probably where I go over the most interesting part of my training, which is what is the difference between these two. And I usually tell people is that an internal link is, let me cancel this for 1 second, get my main screen back on. An internal link is anything I can grab in my Cascade project in my Cascade site. So I have, in this particular project, which contains all the liberal arts departments, all of the liberal arts departments. If I'm on Visual Performing Arts website, I can internally link to the history website because we are all in the same project. However, we are not part of Purdue.edu. We are not part of College of Agriculture. So all of those would be outside of the realm of our Cascade project, and so those would be treated as external links. So things they like to use internal links for are links to other pages on your website or anything you can see here. In the case of, like, I know you have, Craner has all of the other subsites inside the same project. So you can easily then internally link to those other subsites inside your Craner project. If your site is set up kind of as its own thing, it stands on its own, then you'll probably have to use an external link for anything outside your one individual area. But anything you can reach here in this folder structure is an internal link. So linking the documents, linking the pages. It gives you this link chooser down here. If I click on the second button, I can now actually use this list of folders inside of my site and pick something that I want to link to. So let's say I want to link to the philosophy homepage. I can open up the philosophy folder, click on index, see what I just selected, and I'll confirm, and that now leads me to have the philosophy index page selected here. There are 4 options down here for both internal and external links. The first is an anchor. That's only used if I have anchors on the page that I want to jump to. I'll get to anchors after I get to links, so don't worry about this right now. The target, if I wanted to use same window or new window, I usually keep it as same window because I feel like people are now used to opening up tabs on their own if they want to, so I don't want to force users to open up a new window if they don't want to. But you can easily do that if you want to. There's no problem with it. The title of a link, this I usually tell users to keep blank because I expect them to have their link text, in this case the word pre-formatted, what I highlighted before I created the link. If that's descriptive enough, then you don't necessarily need to have a link title. Is that correct? Usually I tell, from a accessibility standpoint. You do want to fill out a link title if your link text is something like click here. And I don't know what that links to. What is click here? Is that a clickhere.com? I don't know. Is that a site? If I have click here as my link text, the user probably doesn't know where that goes. So in that case, I would fill out a link title that says this is a link to this location or something like that. And that tells the user, instead of click here, more of what that link is going to before they click on it. But for the most part, I tell people, try to keep your link text as descriptive as possible so you don't have to fill out the link title. And then class, this is again is the exact same list as was in the styles dropdown earlier. So I've never used this. It's just for like class attribute on the link tag. If you wanted to create it as a red link, I guess you could put red as a dropdown for a color. If you want to use that, you can. Again, your developer will set this up, and I'll probably tell you how to use that. The same 4 features here will be, well, let me go ahead and insert this link so I can show you what the link looks like. It turns into a blue underlined thing. This, again, is dependent on what the CSS styles are for this site. If I click on this link here, I can't actually go to it because I'm in edit mode. So to actually check to see if I just came into this page and I see a lot of links on the page, and I'm wondering what does this link go to, I have to click on it and then click on the Insert Edit Link again and see, oh yes, I remember this was when I set up the Philosophy Index page link. So that's really the only way you can see what that link goes to from the edit screen. Likewise, on the external link, the only difference here is that it changes this link chooser now to a text field where I can type in whatever link I want. So here, let's say I want to link to the Purdue website, I can just type in the purdue.edu web address. Same 4 options down here, whatever you want to set those as. Click on Update, and now, even though you can't see anything different here, I have a link to the Purdue.edu website. And I can check that again by clicking somewhere on it and then finding it here. Notice that I click on this. I always tell users not to highlight a link to edit it, because if this is inside of a paragraph and I have a space right after it, and now I do this, now it doesn't know what link I have, because I've actually selected more than what my link is. There's a space after this link, but that space is not part of the link. So it's almost like I've selected something like I have text afterwards, and I'm doing something like this. It doesn't know what that is because I'm selecting more than the link that's there. So when I tell users to edit their link, I tell them just to click their mouse cursor somewhere in the middle of that link, and that will get the link for you. So once that mouse cursor is there, I can click on this and see what my link is. Here it is again, Purdue.edu. So that's just another catch besides the spell checker that you'll get used to getting around. The second button here is the unlink button. If I click on that, as you would expect, it will change this back to normal text, and now it is no longer a link. The next button here is anchors. Now anchors are used, if you don't know what an anchor is, it's kind of like a jump link. So you might see links on web pages such as like a back to top or a table of contents at the top of the site that has like 8 links, and then I click on one of those, and what it does is it jumps down to a spot farther down in the current page that you're on. Usually they're used for jumping on a page that you're already on that is very long, but they can be used to jump to another page and then down to a section. So how you set those up, let's say I had a section on my page that was way down here, and I wanted to create an anchor to that. So to do that, or create a link to that, I should say. How I do that is I create an anchor somewhere down here. Now anchors are invisible. They don't actually show up on your page. I can create any anchor name I want to. I'm just going to call this one anchor. Insert it, and now I have a little anchor icon. You don't see that when you're actually looking at the page, though. It's hidden. It has a dotted line around it. If you have 20/20 vision, you can see that, which means that it's not actually there on the live website. Now I'm going to make this a link to that anchor, so when I click on it, it will jump down to that anchor that I placed all the way on the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to create a link to the anchor. So here I'm going to choose, I guess internal, it doesn't really matter I don't think, but the anchor here I'm just going to type in anchor because that's what I named my anchor before. And this is the only time you ever use this anchor thing is if you want to link to an anchor. Leave this blank because I want to link to the current page. Although you probably could select the page that you're on, but I'm creating a new page so that asset doesn't exist yet, so I think the correct thing here is just to leave it blank. That will assume that you're linking to the current page. Click on Insert, and now this, if I tested my page, again, it will work on the edit screen, would be a link to jump down to my anchor down there. So that's how anchors work in a nutshell. If you want more information, you can Google what anchors are. They're kind of complicated how they use them. In the same way, if I had a back to top, it would be the opposite. I would create my anchor way at the top of the page, and then I would create a link way down here and link to that anchor, which is at the top. So same thing, just reversed. The next button is an Insert Edit Image button, which, just like with Insert Custom Character, it inserts it wherever your mouse cursor is at. So don't highlight anything. My mouse cursor is down here. I'm going to click on Insert Edit Image. Again, I have internal and external as my options, but I always tell my users never to use external because that would be an instance of hot linking, which is not bad in and of itself, but it's troublesome if you're linking to an image and then the website that you're linking to takes down the image or changes it to an inappropriate image. You typically don't have control over that image because it's on another website. So I always tell people if you want to link to an image you found on the internet, download it to your computer, upload it to an images folder or somewhere else, and then you can link to it internally. So always use internal on images. You can use external, but I recommend against it. So here, I don't have an image necessarily lined up for this, but assume I have an image that I'm going to click on in this images folder. I'll click on Inserts. I guess I'll go ahead and find one. There can't be a shortage of those in visual performing arts. Although I'm going to find the first one that I click on. There we go, that's a nice image. For images, you have to include alternate text. It has a star next to it, it's required. If I click on Insert without it, it tells me to insert it. What alternate text is, if you haven't joined our accessibility classes, is a descriptive text that defines what the purpose of the image is on your website. So I didn't check what this image is, but I think it was an image of a flower or something, or a solar sound module. So let me go ahead and type that. This is important because if the image doesn't load, or it's also useful for Google because Google doesn't know what a solar sound module image is, but it knows what solar sound module the text is. So if I try typing it in Google now, I now have a higher chance of Google finding my page. It's also useful for assistive technology. You have people that have to hear the page read out to them as opposed to visualizing the page. The width and the height was set here automatically. I didn't have to type this in once I selected the image, but I recommend leaving those alone because if you change these, your image will become distorted. I don't think they're linked together, so I can change one and it won't affect the other one. So leave those alone, click on Insert, and now I have my Solar Sound Module image. Once this image is on the screen, I can click on it, and you can see once I've clicked on it, the image button up here becomes available to click on again. I can change this image, I can change the alternate text, I can change anything else. Also in this advanced screen, I have 4 more options that were hidden before. One is alignment. This is useful to align your image. I usually tell people default left and right are the only ones that make sense to use. All these other ones I believe are for use in a table. So let's click on left. Border width. I'm not sure if I've used that before. I'm not sure what that even is. I don't think we use images as borders, it's depreciated or something. But I do tell users to use vertical spacing, so this is in pixels, 10 pixels top and bottom, or left and right. That'll leave you a nice buffer so the text doesn't run up right against the image and it looks nicer. But I just align this image to the left, which means the text will wrap around to the right of it. So now I can type on the right side of this image. If I wanted to change that, I can click on it again, go to Insert, Edit Image, and change it to right. And now it's the exact opposite with my text wrapping around to the left. If I wanted to get rid of an image, I just tell users to click on it and then treat it as normal text, just hit delete or backspace, and that gets rid of the image for you. I believe you can also right-click on it and it'll have a remove image button. Sure.
I have a
No,
question.
you have to delete over it.
Is there an easy way to get a caption underneath there that's separate from the text and the body?
Is there an easy way? Probably not. I tell my users, because there's a table button that's so easily, readily available, to insert a table, and then with the table you can align it left and right the same as an image. It's very easy to do that. So I would create a 1-column, 2-row table, which would have the image on top and then a caption beneath. But then I'm going to get the tables in a second so you know how to set that up. That's the easiest way that I know from using the WYSIWYG editor. You could have built-in ways in your template to do that. But using this, the easiest way is to use tables, which is a little bit unfortunate.
It's the way we do it over news service for all those news releases.
Yeah.
That way it also holds up no matter how you're sending it.
This button, Insert, Edit, Embedded Media, I thought would be a nice way to include videos on web pages, and I was sort of mistaken. This works, again, just like if you put your mouse cursor somewhere, it'll insert it at that point. But I was looking for this type and looking for YouTube or looking for something that made sense more than Flash, QuickTime, and all these other media types. Real media? I don't know who uses that anymore. But this is for if you already have your video uploaded, you could use this. Does it create a container around it? How does it insert it? Just using the object tag?
Object.
Okay. As a web developer, I don't think we want to look at all this. I would rather use like a JavaScript library. Is that correct, Kevin? What would you use?
I'd probably use JavaScript.
Yeah, we all use JavaScript now just to handle cases. I wouldn't use this. So I tell, especially users, but even other web developers, not to use this button. In the next update of Cascade, I believe they are changing the functionality of this to include easy YouTube insertion on the page. So this may change. I may recommend using this in the future whenever we upgrade this. So for right now, I just say don't use this or let your web developer handle it for you. As a content contributor, I would recommend against using this because it's much more complicated than it needs to be. The next button is horizontal rule. How often do you go to tables? I don't think I have a lot of time today, like 20 minutes left. I can wrap it up.
Let's go over these next two.
Okay, I'm almost done.
Oh, we need
Table,
to-
horizontal rule is just a page break on your page. It again works wherever I have my mouse cursor. If I click on that, it gives me an option to specify a width in pixels. I usually tell users to change this to percentage because it makes more sense. So now I type in 90% of the page, and if I click on Insert, I usually ignore these other two options down here. Now I have a nice page divider that separates content from the top and the bottom. And to get rid of this, you can either try to get your mouse right on the pixel where it's at, or you can just backspace over it, and that should eventually get rid of that. But that is useful if you'd like to use it. There's no certain recommendation on if you want to use page dividers or horizontal lines to separate content. And the last feature is insert table. Now, like I said for this, let's say I wanted to create this into a caption real quick. I'm actually going to have to get rid of this. Well, I'll do a cut and paste later. I think that'll work. So let me go down here. I'm going to insert a table. Again, this gets inserted right where my mouse cursor is. There's no highlighting involved. Click on Insert Edit Table. It gives me a long list of options here, but what I'm going to do is a 1-column, 2-row table, just for right now. You can specify any number that you want to up here. I'm going to leave most of these options blank just because this is a short demo, but I am going to align it to the right so I can show it like this. Leave the border alone. I don't know what the size of this is. Let's just say it's under 300. And then I'm going to leave class alone. So everything else I'm going to leave alone. Just basically rows and columns aligned to the right and give it a width. Insert that, and now I have a table with 2 rows and 1 column. So now I'm going to try, hopefully this works, to cut and paste that in here. It did work. And now you can see I have a section down here where I can type an image caption. Now this is not perfect because I overshot how actually large this image is. I guess I forgot already that it's 190, so I could go back in here, edit my table. As long as my mouse cursor is somewhere inside of this table, it edits that table that it's in. So if my mouse cursor was over here, and I clicked on this, now I'm inserting a new table. But if my mouse cursor was somewhere inside of this table here, and I click on Insert Edit Table, now I'm editing the table that I'm already in. So let me change this back down to 190. I don't think I added any padding. Oh yeah, I did 10. So let me make this 210. And now that looks nice. I have a nice border around my image, and I have a nice image caption. So does that answer your question about how to use that?
Thank you.
Ideally, as web developers, we don't like to use tables, but for this case, using the editor is the best way to do it. And this will expand with how much text you have. So
I've had issues with different browsers in the table where you couldn't go back and edit it.
I think 7 has a problem, maybe 8.
Yeah. My user had to use Safari. They could access it in Safari, but not Firefox.
Yeah, I have noticed that. I don't know. I think I usually tell them to close out of Cascade and reload it, and sometimes it works better then. It's just hit or miss. It's not always that the table doesn't work, but sometimes it doesn't work. It's just hard to get your mouse cursor in there. You can get it in there if you try, moving your, using keyboard keys to get inside of it. Then you can get in it, but sometimes it's hard for the mouse to find it. Anyways, once you're in a table, there's a new right-click menu that has to do all about tables, where you can add rows, add columns, mess with cells. And the most important one is delete table, because there's no real way to delete this table. I think you can backspace over it, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because you might get other text. So to get rid of this table, you just click somewhere in it again, right-click, and go to delete table, and that will remove the whole table from your web page. And the last thing I'm going to go over besides the HTML code feature is how to fix formatting. So let me just assume this is a poorly formatted page, which is not, and just copy and paste this text in here. And let's say this didn't copy over correctly. I could highlight the troublesome content. Let's say this list is really, I didn't want this list at all. These next 2 buttons, Clean Up Messy Code and Remove Formatting, will remove, as they say, formatting that gets holdover from other systems. So if I highlight this, click on this button, it doesn't do anything, but if I click on this button, you can see it removed the bold from this headline. So let me try this again down here. You can see it's bold before. If I click on Remove Formatting, it removes that bold, so now I'm back to normal text. This is just an example, but there are certainly going to be a lot of different cases where you copy and paste content, and these 2 buttons will turn it back to normal, so then I can work with it using the formatting features inside of Cascade. And the last one, paste as plain text. Instead of doing that, what I could do is turn this toggleable feature on, paste as plain text. It tells me I'm now in plain text mode. The next time I paste, it'll be stripped. So this thing is on now, and now if I hit paste, the content that I put in there has already been its content or its formatting removed. So now you don't even see the list. The list is actually, I think it's right here, but it's all collapsed. Maybe it's down here. One of those 2. Either way, there's no bold, there's no links. It strips the links from your content. So this is actually a much more harsh option to use. I'd recommend using these 2 first. And if those don't work, or if your formatting is just out of sorts, you can use this, turn it on, and then paste, and that should really take you down to the bare bones text formatting. This works the same as if I copied and pasted it into Notepad first and then pasted it in, or if you're on a Mac, if you use TextEdit. And the last button here is Edit HTML Source, which I've already used a couple times to check things. If I click on that, now I get the actual raw HTML, and I can make a lot of serious damage from here if I wanted to type some random stuff in. So that is basically it for the rich text editor or the WYSIWYG editor. Does anyone have any questions after all of that? On how to do anything or how functionality is or works?
Now, one of the uses I've used, some of my users have used with the HTML button, is if they have something like Dreamweaver on their machine, they'll do all their edits over there, change their fonts, all that kind of stuff. Then they'll go into HTML view and paste the code into there, just because they don't necessarily like the editor that's built in here. You can use whatever editor you want, HTML editor you want, and then paste it into code view, just as a workaround.
Yes?
I have two questions. One, I was noticing on the text that you had copied and pasted in, that when you highlighted it, that when you went to use those last two buttons to clean it up and take the code out, I saw that the bold button was highlighted. If I would have clicked on the bold button, would that have taken it away?
Yes.
Okay. And then question number two, so then you don't really have to use those.
Don't have to use what?
You don't really have to
It depends on how messy your code is.
There's technically 3 ways to put bold on a web page. You can have a B tag, a strong tag, or you could use CSS styling. Any one of those 3 might come from Microsoft Word. You won't know. And so this bold tag or bold button, I think, only works for 2 of those 3 instances.
Okay.
If it somehow comes over using the CSS version, there is no other way. You can't use the bold button to remove that bold.
And that's where the other would come in.
Yes. Like I said, most of these are used for messy content from Microsoft Word that doesn't really translate over to a web page very well. What I copied from is a very clean system. There's no crazy formatting on a wiki.
Right.
So it's very straightforward. It'll copy over just fine.
And my second question was, and it probably does, but I just wanted to ask, when you did the table with the graphic and then you had the second cell where you entered the text, if you hit your paragraph spacing buttons up there at the top, your formatting on the top row there, no, next one up.
Well, I'm trying to get my table.
Oh, I'm sorry. But anyway, if you would just use your buttons there, then you can center the text and everything else too.
Yes, it'll center it from within the table. So if I highlighted this, hit center, now it's centered right within the table, right within the cell that it's contained. Yes.
Is there a way to change the size of your font?
That has to be set up.
Not without the style.
Yeah.
Your developer has to set up a style that adjusts your font. The same with color. You can't change your font face, your font size, or your font color without a style being set up for you by your developer.
The CSS.
Yes.
Okay.
Those are removed in the default installation of this editor. So as developers, we then have to go in and create CSS styles here so that you can reuse those 3 features that were removed from this. And we have to do that. We can't like add a button that says, here's the color button. No, there is no color button. And you have to use styles.
Those are really the only functionality missing from Word, and that's the functionality that I'm asked for the most as a developer is, hey, I want to be able to change fonts. Well, there really isn't a way unless I add styles in there.
And from a developer's point of view, I don't want the users picking whatever fonts they want, because then you lose your consistency of your web pages.
I can understand those for fonts, but sometimes it's nice just to have like different sizes for different things you're trying to point out on a page without having to use H1 or your different tags.
Well, one thing in that regard to keep in mind is if you're changing the size of something, your text, is it because it's a heading versus regular body copy? Right. If it is a heading, the big reason to use the heading tag is that for accessibility it means something. So if someone's using a screen reader, they can get a list of all the headings on a page and jump to the section they want to jump to.
It's an organizational thing where you can kind of then see, okay, what are the main topics of this page by identifying each of the headers.
Now sometimes
H1's being the most important topic, and then you've got like 3 H2s, which are the next most important,
so sometimes you're just trying to make text stand out a little bit more, and really the only things you have to do that is bold, italics, and underline. And even the underline I would shy away from,
Because being on a web page, if it's underlined, it's a link.
that's what most people think. So that one I tend to tell people to stay away from.